EvE Online, affectionately known as one of the easiest space sim MMOs to learn, has become free to play. Hey guys, I'm Morphologist and I used to play this game, regrettably religiously. So in this video, I'm going to give you some information about EvE Online, the backstory of it, some of the mechanics of it, and then I'm going to explain the free-to-play clone that's been added to EvE Online, allowing players to play for free indefinitely. So if you didn't know, EvE Online is a game basically based somewhere in the distant future. Humanity has ventured through a wormhole with a bunch of colonists, and eventually that wormhole collapses. Wow, nobody saw that coming. Eventually these humans run out of fuel and are forced to land on planets. On these planets, a lot of them die. Let's be honest, not every planet in the universe is going to be habitable. Those who survive are unable to maintain the equipment that they have and eventually completely lose touch with their original humanity. In fact, they lose touch with one another altogether. So these different planets eventually create their own cultures that become the four factions of the game: the Amar, the Minmatar, the Galente, and the Kaldari. They each have their own very rich and interesting backstory, which you can read about both in the game and in novels canonized by CCP. More importantly though, these factions each have their own attributes. Amar are more tanky and long distance with laser beams, and Galente are also armor-based, but up close and personal with lots of DPS. The Kaldari are long distance with shields and basically shoot rockets and torpedoes. And then we have the Minmatar, which are kind of an interesting faction that focus on shields as well as long-range artillery, more conventional armaments. You can think of like today's sort of weapons that we would use in space, all projectile weapons. But these basically boiled down to different PvP mechanics, which is way too complicated to talk about in one video, so I'm not going to even try. You, as a player in EvE Online, though, are a demigod. You are a pod pilot which has infinite clones. Of course, those clones are expensive and you don't want to lose them. When you die, you do lose everything. You lose your ship, you lose your implants and everything that's attached to it. But for the most part, you're immortal, and that's one of the major parts of the story of this game. Mechanically speaking though, it's not a game like Star Citizen. You can't pilot ships with a joystick. It's a click-based game with all third-person mode, so it's not the game that everybody's going to want to play as a space sim. EvE Online is multiplayer only. You play on one server with sometimes populations as high as 70,000 people on big release days, and it takes place in the EVE Galaxy, which is a galaxy with lots and lots of different stars that you can go to individually with different ratings, or basically sec ratings, which lets you know whether or not players can attack you from 1.0 to 0. 1.0 is more like the Care Bear zone, the safe zone for new players. 0.0 is really the Wild West. You go there and anybody can gank you. But that's not to say that you can't just get ganked in high sec in 1.0 space. In fact, there are squads that go around in destroyers just ganking players in high sec and losing sec status themselves. That's a whole different story, those are trolls, but it can make for some really interesting gameplay and keep you on your toes if you think you're just safe in 1.0 space. Now, if you're wondering what sort of game it is in terms of multiplayer PvP, it's a game you're going to want to play with friends, with preferably larger fleets. It's definitely not a game that you can solo easily. In fact, I would say numbers are everything, considering some of the largest fleet battles that occur can number in the thousands of concurrent players. But don't worry if you're not really into those big fleet battles sort of things. There are much smaller battles that you can participate in. Things like low-sec and null-sec roams, which are pretty common in decent corporations. Heck, you can even get a small group of your friends together, go hunt down little unsuspecting players and take all their stuff. Make a ton of money in the process, and gain a little bit of power. But hey, if you're not into that sort of thing, you can do a lot of other stuff too that doesn't involve PvP. Stuff like mining, trading, basically like space trucking, playing the markets, doing manufacturing. There's a lot of stuff to do in EvE, and that's what makes it so great. It really is a sandbox. Personally though, I really find the PvP really rewarding, considering that when you lose a ship, you really do lose everything. That means when you gank a guy, you know that guy's pissed. And I know it's kind of trolly, but let's be honest, it does make it much more thrilling when you do get a kill, and much more scary when you're about to die. Visually, EvE Online is stunning, the graphics are fantastic, and considering it's an engine originally developed in 2003, it has come a very long way. If you are concerned though about the performance of EvE Online because you've got an older computer with lesser hardware, don't worry. This game is quite old and they do understand that people have lower end rigs. Not to mention it needs to be able to run thousands and thousands of players at once, so it is very well optimized. Alright, so now we've gotten to the point where you might be interested in playing EvE Online and you want to know a little bit more about that free-to-play account. Well, here's the thing. EvE Online doesn't have leveling. It doesn't have a skill grind system. What it has instead is a skill book system. You buy books with currency in-game, you set your character to learn them, and after a duration of time, that character acquires that ability at starting level 1. And then it goes all the way up to level 5. These allow you to equip certain equipment and fly certain ships, and these are important to EvE Online, but you don't even have to be online for these to work. You can actually log off, and it will continually train while you still have an account. Unfortunately, the free version of the game will not allow you, though, to train books that enable you to fly Tech 2 or Tech 3 ships. So higher level skills will be off limits until you get the full version of the game. In addition, you're going to be capped at cruiser-class ships. The class system of ships basically start at frigate, then they go to destroyer, then to cruiser, then to battlecruiser, then to battleship, and finally capital ships. So you're stuck somewhere in the middle. But don't let that get you down. You're going to get a lot of mileage out of EvE Online in the free-to-play mode. Cruisers can still be used at roams and in fact are very common. Sometimes we even do all frigate roams. So if you're thinking that you're not going to be able to participate in large fleet events or play with your friends, don't worry, you will be able to. But if ever in the future you want to move to higher levels of PvP and going down to nullsec, then you're going to want to invest in the full account. But you can always pay for that in in-game currency. One of the largest restrictions, though, placed on you as a free account is your faction. You are locked into your faction only, meaning you can only fly, say, Amar ships if you're an Amar character. So before you commit to a certain character in a faction, make sure you are okay with that faction's specific focus. Do a little bit of research on that faction and make sure it fits your playstyle. If you're curious, I'm actually playing Galente, though the ship you see on the screen is a Kaldari battlecruiser because I am spec'd into all factions because I have the non-free-to-play subscription-based account. Aside from these restrictions, there are other small things like the training speed and how many skills you can set in the skill queue, and it does limit your ability to try other classes of ships that are specialized, such as interceptors or interdictors or stealth bombers. These are things that you're going to have to actually get the paid version of the game in order to use, or again, use in-game currency to purchase. Now, before you jump the gun and say it's pay to win, I want you to understand that this game was originally subscription only with no free-to-play option. So this is very new for them, a way of getting new players into the game and showing them what EvE is all about. So that's the way you should approach it. In addition, be aware that there is no leveling in EvE Online. There's only a skill book system, meaning that a very experienced and skilled player with very low skill points can actually beat a very high skill point player that's not very good at the game. There's also no way to use money to actually equate that to real power in the game. EvE Online does have a premium shop, but it's not like any other premium shop you might be used to, because there's nothing in that shop that gives you an advantage over other players. All ships, modules, and skill books have to be purchased with in-game currency. That's it. So if you're interested in the game, be sure to check the description of the video. I'll provide a link to the website there, as well as a link to our Discord community where you can interact with other players of EvE Online who are part of our community, and even strike up a conversation with Captain Shack, Wasted Space, or even myself. You can also expect that we're going to be doing an event at some point in this game in the future now that it's become free to play. So hopefully this also gives you a little bit of a head start if you're interested in playing this game in the future with us as we do a live stream. So I hope to see you guys there, and I'll see you guys next time.